We all use plastic in our lives, and in many ways plastic has been a real godsend to societies, and if we think about the amount of plastic that is used in medical applications and medical research, it has been transformational and hence a good. However, lots of plastic ends up becoming waste, and often that waste ends up in the natural environment. Mostly it's plain for us to see when it's large, what we call macroplastic, but then there's also the aspect of microplastics that you would need a microscope to see. These plastics are so small that they can actually enter bodies and body tissues and then potentially interfere with cellular level processes as well. Now, research at Heriot-Watt University has been looking at the issue of plastic in the environment for at least a decade now. And for example, we know that it is widespread in the marine environment, and researchers here at Heriot-Watt have documented it all around the coast of Scotland, even in those areas where there are very few people actually living. And that's because, of course, the ocean is a transport conveyor belt for things like particulate pieces of plastic in the ocean. If we think about the wider implications of microplastic potentially getting into the human food chain, then my colleague Ted Henry has been looking at this in much more detail, where he took mussels, which are a type of bivalve mollusk, which you can get in your local restaurants, and then studied them to see if microplastic contamination could be found in them. So mussels, because they filter seawater, these are exactly the sort of organisms which are going to pull microplastic particles out of the seawater. And of course, if when you buy your mussel it has microplastic in it, there's the possibility that you're going to eat it. Question though is putting that into context. So what Ted did was, not only did he identify that microplastic, yes, did occur in mussels, which perhaps is not surprising, but when you actually were sitting down to have your plate of mussels in your restaurant or in your kitchen at home, actually more microplastic ended up on your plate and in your dinner from the atmosphere in the room in which you were sitting, as opposed to what you were actually ingesting from the mussels themselves. So we need to actually understand that the atmosphere around us that we're actually living in is also contributing to our intake of microplastics. But the important question, of course, is, does it actually matter? And that is really the key question, which then takes us into more sort of medical research areas to try and understand whether there are any impacts on us as human beings. So our latest project, which focuses on the impacts of plastic waste, is looking at the impact of that waste on coastal communities in Vietnam. This project is one of the Global Challenges Research funded projects, funded by the UKRI through ODA money from the UK government. Our project includes about 7 partner institutions in Vietnam. These include universities, but also government institutions and research centres as well. So we've built a very large and multidisciplinary team in Vietnam, and it's a team from the Lyle Centre at Heriot-Watt University that is the UK institution involved. And what we're trying to do is to understand the flow, so the source of the plastic, into the ocean and where that plastic ends up. In other words, where is the sink for this plastic? Using a variety of multidisciplinary approaches, which include oceanography and also social anthropology. We're using gaming techniques, we're using environmental and also microbial science, and we're using social science techniques to do very extensive interviews with fishing, aquaculture and tourist business communities to understand how that waste impacts them. What we're seeing is that, first of all, there is a lot of plastic waste in Vietnam. Of that, there is no doubt. We know globally that Vietnam contributes about 4% of all the plastic waste that is floating around in the ocean at the moment. So if we think about how plastic affects people's lives, yes, on the one hand, there's the positive aspect that it enables people to do certain things. So we see, for example, in Vietnam, the use of plastic mulches, which has greatly enhanced their terrestrial agriculture systems and has, increased productivity. So people are becoming more wealthy. The negative aspect of that is if that plastic mulch then finds its way into a watercourse, It's then impacting the aquaculture farmer further down the coast, whose water intake is blocked up with that plastic waste. And when that fragments and becomes microplastic, then that microplastic may be transporting pathogens into the aquaculture farmer's pond and leading to the death or disease, problems for his crop of shrimps or pangasius catfish or whatever it might be. We also know that it's a safety issue for them. So when plastic becomes wrapped around the propellers of fishing vessels, they lose a day's fishing, or worse still, a crewman is told to go into the water to clear that plastic waste. And we've heard reports of fishermen being seriously injured as a result of doing that. On the microplastic side of things, though, here there's a really big educational issue for us. Many of the members of the general public that we engage with in Vietnam are not aware that plastic is a problem. They often ask us, I didn't know. Why is it a problem? The Vietnamese government has put in place some very proactive policies to reduce waste. But the question is, how is that going to be implemented? So one of the other aspects of our project, which we haven't yet undertaken, but is a very important aspect because it will come at the end of the project, is to engage with businesses who are involved in the circular economy to see whether we can turn that waste into actually a valuable product and thereby help alleviate the problem in the environment as well. The Lyle Centre, because of its multidisciplinarity, allows us to build teams of people that all bring different skills to bear on a particular problem. And this is where working with colleagues from the humanities and social sciences becomes really important, because when you consider laws are enabling processes for policies to be put in place, for example. And when we think about people, it's people that have to live with the consequences of the policies once they're in place. The other critical thing for us to do is to engage with government and also businesses to try and change behaviour. Simple things. So, for example, Vietnam has a propensity for a lot of single-use plastic bag commoditization. Now, obviously, there are businesses that built their business on the production of single-use plastic bags. But just as we have seen in the UK, you can change through behaviours and lead people to best practice where we use reusable bags, we don't use single-use bags. So these sort of softer policies that are nudging society in the right direction are critical, but they have to be based on good scientific evidence and that these things are actually worthwhile doing and investing in.